to today's episode of the podcast. We will be discussing the current political situation in Northern Ireland in regards to what is occurring within the DUP and in regards to the DUP, and we'll be joined by Connor. How are you doing, Connor?
I'm doing good. How are you, Christopher?
Good. It's been quite an extensive period of time since we've actually done an episode. 2 months, I think it's been. I think we talked about the vaccinations previously.
Yeah, I believe it was.
So, Connor, do you just want to start us off and talk a bit about what's actually currently occurring, or what did occur with Arlene Foster?
Yeah, so I suppose going back a bit, there was the whole situation with Boris Johnson denying there would be a border or customs checks between Northern Ireland and the rest of Great Britain. Of course, via the Northern Ireland Protocol and the Brexit agreement, that was not the case, where there are customs checks between the two. And of course, a lot of people on the Unionist side were very angry at the DUP and specifically Arlene Foster for being sort of blindsided by Boris Johnson on that. And it all kind of culminated on the 27th of April when it was reported that 80% of DUP MLAs and MPs had signed a motion of no confidence in Arlene Foster as leader of the DUP. Another factor that contributed to this was actually Arlene Foster abstaining on a bill that would ban gay conversion therapy in Northern Ireland just a few days prior to the voting of confidence. It was, of course, masterminded by Edwin Poots, who seemed to get whip the numbers to remove Arlene Foster as leader.
Yeah, and many really talked about after he had actually basically led the charge on removing Arlene Foster. He really didn't know what he wanted to do himself when it came to being leader. I'm not sure if he actually laid out a concise plan with other members of the party of, almost a roadmap of what would be occurring or what he wants to do as leader. And I don't think he fully understood the challenges that came with taking up the mantle as the leader of the DUP. And another thing, just on what you were saying in regards to the 80% and just the whole coup against Arlene Foster, it almost seemed I almost took it as kind of a shock. It kind of all came quite swiftly, I'd say, but I'm not sure about what actually had led up to the event that occurred. But you were talking about how Arlene had abstained on the banning of conversion therapy.
Yeah. And
it really says and really speaks volumes about the internal affairs of the Democratic Unionist Party of current.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're definitely a party divided. There was other members who abstained in that bill as well. Paula Bradshaw, who would be elected deputy leader at the same time as Pitt was elected leader. She also abstained on the bill, but I think it was mainly just a combination of things. The main thing to Arlene being removed would definitely be the Northern Ireland Protocol, and many people, especially on the hardest line of the party, were quite annoyed and said that she had been quite soft on the party or on the protocol, and that she could have done more to stop it.
And then obviously you've got some more moderate members who seem to have backed Arlene. Very little of them, I suppose, considering 80% wanted her gone. But this all resulted in a leadership election within the Democratic Unionist Party. It's actually a fun fact that this was the first leadership election in the party, in the party's 50-year history, with Edwin Poots and Jeffrey running against one another, the only two candidates standing. And you usually see, or you have seen at least of recent, if you take the UUP, for example, that the parties don't tend to have much leadership contests within the NI Assembly, considering Doug Beattie just ran by himself and got the job, and it seems that was also the case with Jeffrey Donaldson in the second one. We'll get to that after. So Edwin Poots won this by a very slim margin. I was actually quite surprised by this. I thought that he would have won by a much larger margin. So it was 19 to Edwin and 17 to Jeffrey. And Edwin, after he had won the leadership, had immediately made the announcement that he did not want to become the First Minister. And then this led on to a whole new series of events that unfolded and resulted in his resignation. So beforehand, Edwin was actually the Minister for Agriculture. I'm actually not 100% sure how that stands. Does his status still stand as Minister of Agriculture? Do you know that?
Well, of course, he announced his new cabinet. Of course, he nominated Paul Givan for First Minister, Gary Middleton for Junior Minister, Paul Furry for Economy Minister, and Michelle McLeaven for Education Minister. And he remained in his post as Agriculture Minister in that new executive team for the DUP.
Mm-hmm. It seems as though that executive team is probably going to become is subject to change in the near future, I'd say. So anyway, both factions. So yeah, Edwin Poots, stating that he would not be the First Minister, then proceeded to nominate Paul Givan for First Minister. Now, this was something that the party did not agree on. It was something that both factions of the party actually unanimously agreed that the nomination was incorrect. And I think this is evident from the amount of people who actually did vote for Paul Givan within the party. Many voted against him, First Minister, somewhere around 20 MLAs, with only 6 voting in favour within the party, which is a substantial amount of individuals voting against him.
As well, in that 20 or so MLAs, you have like Michelle McLeaven, who he had chosen as Education Minister, voting against it. The person he had chosen to be chief whip of the Democratic Unionist Party, whose name escapes me, he also voted to not nominate Paul Givan as First Minister.
Yeah, so Paul Givan wasn't really the popular choice for First Minister within the DUP. This ultimately led to a large amount of, I think one DUP member put it as civil war within the party. Basically what occurred after this was, after just 21 days of being leader, a very short leadership, Edwin Poots resigned. The pressure of basically both factions, the faction that had supported the removal of Arlene Foster and the faction that supported Arlene Foster remaining, came to the agreement that this was incorrect, and so he just curbed to the pressure, I suppose. That led to the resignation, and ultimately then led to what had occurred next. So have you any thoughts on that, Connor?
Also, I just want to go back to the event that led to Poots' resignation. The Sinn Féin wanted assurances from Edwin Poots that he would continue to agree to the New Deal, New Approach agreement that had been made last January between all the members of the Assembly, and specifically the Irish Language Act, to which there was a bit of a tense negotiation, which ultimately led to Brandon Lewis, the Northern Ireland Secretary in Westminster, agreeing that if the Assembly failed to legislate for the Irish Language Act, it would be legislated in Westminster. And this was very strongly disapproved of by the rest of the DUP. Poots seemed to miscalculated support for this. Jeffrey Donaldson, who he beat in the leadership contest and is the DUP group leader in Westminster, he wrote a letter on behalf of the 9 DUP MPs saying that they wanted an urgent meeting with Edwin Poots to discuss the nomination of Paul Givan and the deal that was struck over the Irish Language Act.
This led to, I can only imagine, even more infighting, which obviously wasn't great for Edwin Poots at the time. But yeah, Sinn Féin went over the Assembly's head and went ahead to Westminster and had asked if they could legislate it, and that's what occurred. And thanks for pointing out that very fundamental part in what actually resulted in the resignation of Edwin. But then finally, now we've come to the present, Jeffrey Donaldson stood for the leader of the party. He stood unopposed, and it seemed as though he also stood on the idea that the Irish sea border was wrong. He stated, I believe, after he became leader, our priority will be to right the wrong that has been done by the imposition of the Northern Ireland Protocol and to restore Northern Ireland's place fully within the United Kingdom's internal market. Northern Ireland is given the right under the Act of Union to trade freely with the rest of our own country, and all that we ask is for that right to be restored, that we can trade freely with the rest of the United Kingdom and continue to trade with our neighbours. So it seems as though he's taking the approach, like the previous leaders of the Democratic Unionist Party, that the Irish the protocol is, well, it needs to go. But the question that really should be asked currently is, what methodology does he want to employ to actually successfully remove the protocol? Because it seems as though it has been mostly words from the previous DUP leaders and not really much action, because they don't really know what to do, because ultimately Westminster holds the decision over what occurs here.
Obviously, there was reports came out that when it was apparent that Donaldson would be the only one running for leader, so the designated leader, that he had informed Paul Givan that he expected him to resign as First Minister of Northern Ireland. It's unclear as to whether or not that is so that Donaldson has implied that he seeks to become an MLA again so that he can lead the party from Stormont rather than from Westminster. So it's unclear whether or not that will happen, or whether or not he'll nominate someone else, at least temporarily, to be the First Minister, yes. But yeah, it was very interesting to see that he'd informed Paul Givan that he expected him to resign as First Minister. Of course, no one can force Paul Givan to stand down. It's a decision entirely for him. It'll be interesting to see whether or not it is just so that he can put someone else into the job, or if it will be a negotiation tactic to perhaps threaten collapsing the Assembly over the protocol.
It's definitely going to be interesting to see. I really did not see much of a breakthrough previously between Sinn Féin and DUP on the nomination of Paul Givan as the First Minister. I thought that it was ultimately going to result in the collapsing of the Assembly and an early Assembly election. I still believe that an early Assembly election is a very real possibility. I think currently power sharing is under an immense amount of strain from the events that have unfolded. And I think that will continue to happen, especially when anger is currently being expressed at a very large scale within many unionist working class communities. We see this through the form of many protests, and even previously, in the previous couple of months, we had seen some appalling scenes of violence unfolding in the streets, and they had described it as the worst scene since the Troubles. So it's a very worrying time currently in Northern Ireland, and we'll really just have to see what happens over the coming months.
I think the thing is, I think it would be very foolish of the DUP to try and aim for an early Assembly election, given the recent polling data has suggested that if there was an election held today, Sinn Féin would end up the largest party in the Assembly, and the DUP might actually come third in that election, given that they are currently tied with the Alliance Party on 16%. Yeah, if the polls were to be believed, of course. But yeah, it would not be a good look for the DUP to go from the largest party to the third largest party, and it would, you'd have to assume, would spell the end of the Donaldson era if he made that type of miscalculation to think that he can win an Assembly election.
Yeah, the Alliance Party have been making quite a lot of gains, and it's actually very interesting to see what the UUP have been doing as well. Doug Beattie had talked about moving the UUP to more of a centre-left party, which is very interesting, because currently within unionism, as of current, we don't really see much left-wing policy implementations or adoptions. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes, because traditionally the UUP, in my eyes at least, has been more of a right-wing party, along with many other unionist parties. But no, it's definitely interesting to see that the DUP really haven't been able to sustain the full support of the members within the traditional unionist communities. And actually, I remember I was watching, I can't remember, it was a show anyway, and I was interviewing one of the working class unionist individuals, and she was saying that she doesn't buy the argument as of current from the DUP that she should continue to vote for the DUP just to prevent Sinn Féin from achieving the first ministerial role. I don't think that people in the unionist communities are very worried about who's First Minister, because at the end of the day, the roles of Deputy First Minister and First Minister are identical. So the DUP are going to really need to somehow bolster the support through a series of different, policy promises, or they need to get something to really prevent such a crushing defeat in the next Assembly election, which may come early.
Even if it is not early. It's still scheduled to be on May the 6th of 2022. So it's not that far away, even if it is not pulled forward. So DUP would really need to get their act together pretty quickly if they want to do well in that election.
So is there anything else you'd like to add to this, Connor, before we wrap it up for today?
I just think that the DUP, like I said before, they really need to get their act together, because yes, 3 leaders in 3 months, where they had three leaders in like the previous 50 years. The day Edwin Poots resigned, 17th of June, it was quite a major victory, I think, for nationalist parties and other unionist parties. The TUV and the UUP have been taking votes from the DUP for quite a while, but stuff like that won't help with the almost a clown show by the DUP. So I just think they need to really sort it out quickly.
And the very large split within unionism, it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds. It'll be interesting to see how unionism, if it can pull together again, and if this split is something that's going to be prevalent for an extensive period of time, or whether things will regain some degree of stability within the Democratic Unionist Party. To me, it is it's something I've never actually seen in politics. In the time I've been watching, reading politics and so on, it's something that I never see. You usually don't see this type of behaviour occurring within politics. Definitely not a leader resigning after 21 days. It's very, very unlikely. So it'll just be very interesting to see, and hopefully we'll be able to cover it a bit more on the podcast in the future. But with that being said, thanks very much for listening to today's episode of the podcast. Hopefully within the next couple of weeks we can pump out some more episodes, and have a very nice day.